Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. Andrew Bailey is the number 2 at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, former Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey. This is basically the worst nightmare of anyone who tried to set up and frame Trump with a Steele dossier or with the absurd hoax pertaining to Trump and Russia. There was never a shred of evidence, not even one shred of evidence, that Trump worked with the Kremlin to release derogatory emails written by Democrats that showed they cheated Bernie Sanders, or any information pertaining to top secret intelligence transferred onto Clinton's private servers. These are all cataclysmic scandals. These are all the most absurd, outlandish political catastrophes for the Democratic Party that they repackaged as Trump working with Russia. Andrew Bailey is there to indict people. You're going to hear the absurd rant about Taylor Swift in a second with Comey, but here, this is just one example. This is Senator Hawley and asking very simple questions of Director Comey, former Director Comey, that will eventually, I believe, get him indicted by Andrew Bailey. I think the indictment is pretty much already there. I think he'll probably flip on Clinton or the Clintons and a whole bunch of other people, but hit subscribe to this channel right now. Check this out.
The General reports it on pages 136 and 137 of this report, and you knew of those concerns before you signed off on the FISA application, didn't you?
I don't think I knew before. I remember reading the footnote that attempted to inform the court of potential bias.
No, actually, the Inspector General found on page 139 of the report, and I quote, on October 12, 2016, Evans' concerns about Steele were briefed to Comey, end quote. And yet you signed off knowing that the research was funded by the Democratic Party, knowing that senior officials in the Department of Justice National Security Division had serious concerns. You signed off nonetheless. Let's talk about what else you knew or didn't know. When you certified that FISA application, did you know the allegations in the Steele dossier came from subsources, not from Steele's own knowledge?
I believe I did know he had a network of sources and subsources, correct.
Did you know who this primary subsource was?
No.
Did you ask who the primary subsource was?
No.
Did you ask the FBI to take any steps to identify that source before submitting this application to the FISA court?
I don't know whether I asked. I knew there was an effort underway to try to replicate Steele's source network so we could figure out what to make of Steele's reporting.
Well, what the Inspector General concluded was that Comey told us, this is page 153, that the application seemed factually and legally sufficient when he read it, and he had no questions or concerns before he signed it. Surely you realize that the source's identity and his motives, this subsource, who we now know may well have been a Russian agent, that would affect his credibility, correct?
I thought it was important that we were informing the court of any potential bias from any source. And I remember reading language in that initial filing that addressed that potential bias issue with respect to the Steele reporting.
So I'm sorry, your testimony now is that you informed the court of potential problems with the subsource, political motivations, connections to foreign governments. The FISA court was informed about that?
No, I'm sorry. I understood your question to be about whether we informed the court about potential bias in Steele's reporting. I didn't know the identity or any information about subsources.
So you personally...
That's almost impossible. The Federal Bureau of Investigation director wouldn't know information about subsources pertaining to a dossier, a document that was literally purchased by Trump's rivals. That's almost impossible. He almost certainly perjured himself numerous times. Comey and others who set up and framed Trump, these are very powerful, or they used to be, they might still be, but they used to be extremely powerful individuals with a great deal of knowledge of how government works. And they were able to use bureaucracy to set up and frame Trump. Now, Andrew Bailey is there. He's a former attorney general. He was the attorney general up until yesterday of Missouri. He's there to indict people. Has nothing to do with the EP files, which is a Democratic Party scandal. EP was a Democratic donor, gave to primarily Democrats, Clinton, Kerry, Schumer, whole bunch of Democrats. But the issue here is that there's going to be indictments. Now, we can hear Comey's bizarre rant in a second about Taylor Swift, but let's continue. None of the testimony here, this was just 4 years ago, there's other testimony in Congress where he almost certainly perjured himself or committed perjury. And I mean, you can look, he's just, just shrugging it off. Well, it's bureaucracy. He's hiding behind bureaucracy, but the bureaucracy now, 4 years ago, he never imagined that Andrew Bailey and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and Pam Bondi and Donald Trump would be, President Trump would have a second term. This testimony was 4 years ago. Andrew Bailey is now the number 2 at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Andrew Bailey is even more passionate than, let's say, Kash Patel, who is extremely passionate, intelligent, has a tremendous background. Let's say we're just as passionate or up to date with what's going on as Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. They know that Trump was set up and framed by a whole bunch of people. Let's continue.
Authorized an unprecedented surveillance on an individual associated with the presidential campaign during that campaign's ongoing time period, October of 2016. You signed off personally on 2 further applications based on information from a source that you believed correctly worked for the Democratic Party. And the source's information, it turns out, was coming from a suspected Russian agent, yet you did nothing to try to verify any of this information. You brushed aside the concerns of high-level national security lawyers at the Department of Justice. How are the American people to trust you or the FBI following abuses like this?
I disagree extensively with your predicate. I think
so. Right now, this is 4 years ago, the testimony, and you have Tulsi Gabbard, the DNI chief, releasing information, declassified documents showing that they knew there was no intelligence on Trump. They fabricated everything, almost everything, and they made absurd leaps of logic to continue to investigate Trump. Imagine if James Comey had signed off on a dossier purchased by Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump against President Obama or Biden or Clinton. Again, imagine if James Comey or Brennan or Clapper used a dossier literally purchased by the Republican National Committee and President Trump's campaign. Imagine what the Daily Beast, New York Times, Washington Post, MSNBC, CNN, The Atlantic, Mother Jones, The Nation, New Yorker, New York Magazine. Imagine what all the editors and journalists would be saying. Imagine the level of journalism, investigative journalism, that would take place to try to debunk a fake, phony dossier purchased by the Republican National Committee and Rudy Giuliani and President Trump against the Democrat. That's exactly what took place towards Trump. Hit subscribe if you're new. Check this out.
the FBI is an organization that is honest, competent, independent, and also flawed because it's made up of human beings.
Well, I have to say, I'm not necessarily worried about the FBI as a whole. I'm worried about you. And I'm worried about what you certified to a court that led the FISA court to conclude that it had been misled repeatedly, and that due to the nature of those repeated misrepresentations, it could no longer trust what the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the agency you led, what it said in subsequent cases. That, I suggest to you, is an incredible dereliction of duty, indeed a betrayal of your responsibility as director of the FBI. If I could, Mr. Chairman, just one last thing I want to follow up on. The letter from to Chairman Graham from John Ratcliffe, which I know you've seen, Mr. Comey, as you mentioned it earlier. Mr. Ratcliffe says, on 7 September 2016, U.S. intelligence officials forwarded an investigative referral to FBI Director James Comey regarding U.S. presidential candidate Hillary Clinton's approval of a plan concerning Donald Trump and Russian hackers as a means of distracting the public from her use of a private mail server, end quote. Did you open an investigation?
I don't know what that refers to. As I said earlier, that does not ring any bells with me when I read that.
It doesn't ring any bells, but it's declassified now by Tulsi Gabbard. This was 4 years ago. He almost certainly perjured himself there. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. Andrew Bailey is at the FBI to indict a number of people. Hit subscribe. Thank you so much.